Thank you. Assemblywoman Irwin, item 17.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. AB 1993 simply requires that a service provider provide their preferred method of contact to the Attorney General so that the Attorney General can maintain a directory of such contacts for law enforcement. It also ensures the availability of two-way communication between service providers and law enforcement. As society continues to move online, so too does the need for law enforcement agencies to seek a service provider's data to solve crimes. There is an increasing number of these requests from law enforcement, many of which are under emergency situations such as a missing person, violent crime, or threats of terror. Many companies have well-established processes that allow law enforcement to get information that they need quickly. However, many law enforcement requests go unanswered past the legally allowable time frame or require multiple exchanges to modify a request. AB 1993 improves efficiency and reliability of this process by ensuring that law enforcement has the information they need to properly submit requests, along with the ability to update or check the status of their request. This standardization will be mutually beneficial to both the companies holding the data and to law enforcement. For example, delays and lengthy back and forths caused by vague requests for data can be eliminated when the requesting officer uses the company's preferred channel of communication and understands what data is available and how to interpret it. This bill does not change consumer privacy protections or existing law determining what should be disclosed. This bill is about ensuring that law enforcement has the information they need to properly submit requests and a reasonable expectation for responsiveness. Miscommunications or delays can be a matter of life and death, and AB 1993 is a simple solution to bridge the existing communication gap between private companies and law enforcement. With me here today in support is Don Hoffman from the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office, who can describe the practical implications and solution offered by this bill.
Good morning. My name is Don Hoffman. I'm a deputy DA in Los Angeles County, and I'm counsel to LA County's CERT team. That's our cyber investigation response team. We prosecute criminal hackers who attack our county information assets and try to steal our data. A big part of my job is reviewing search warrants for electronic communications and, unfortunately, nagging and begging for compliance. The current compliance processes are not effective. Existing law recognizes that internet investigations are extremely time-sensitive. That's one reason that PC 1524 requires that service providers return all records within 5 business days. Some ISPs do take that obligation seriously, and we do have a list of angels, but that is not the norm. Many providers, among them some of the largest and wealthiest, routinely ignore the statutory deadlines. In order to get attribution in these cases, for example, to identify the criminals behind a phishing campaign that resulted in compromise of thousands of personal health records belonging to individuals, belonging to residents, we might have to execute a series of warrants, a series of piggyback warrants to track the criminal hacker from one hot point to another. Each of those search warrants, yields one breadcrumb, and that leads us to the next search warrant. So when we don't get swift compliance, we don't get the legally required compliance, each delay means that our chance of catching the thief and our chance of retrieving our data decays. These crimes are essentially data kidnapping, and so you can imagine the frustration in a real kidnapping case or a critical missing investigation when an investigator has to waste vital hours just to determine where and how best to submit a request. And then it just has to sit and wait and wonder if anyone received it. Communications evidence is increasingly important, and if the current processes are not improved, we can expect these delays to increase as the volume of search warrants increases. When investigators are shut out of the compliance process, it just wastes everyone's time and everyone's resources. I expect that we're going to hear that the current processes are effective. I challenge anyone who makes that claim to explain how a process that routinely misses the statutory deadlines can be considered effective. Too often, the current system is essentially, put your search in a bottle and toss it into the ocean and wait on the beach, hoping that it'll wash up. AB 1993 is a common sense measure that will benefit all the stakeholders by establishing a basic framework for compliance. Thank you.
Okay, others in support?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, Sean Hoffman with the California District Attorneys Association. Generally associate my comments with those of my colleague. I would note that as technology advances, we see more crime taking place online and evidence of other crimes being stored online. Certainly with the passage of SB 178 by Senator Leno last year, we face a very prescriptive process for accessing that data. To the extent that this bill can help facilitate that transfer from the service providers, we think it's a common sense measure and would ask for your support.
Okay, others?
Chair members, Jonathan Feldman with the California Police Chiefs Association. We reached out to our tech committee to review this issue and let us know if this is a problem that they are facing, and they all came back, said yes. So we are in support, and thank the Assembly member for her work.
Madam Chair and members, Corey Salzillo on behalf of the California State Sheriff's Association in support of the bill.
Okay, others in support? Speakers in opposition to the bill?
Thank you, Chairwoman, members of the committee. Robert Callahan with the Internet Association. Here, unfortunately, in opposition, and we are opposed specifically to subdivision B2C in the bill, which is near the top of page 3. I would disagree with a couple of the comments just previously made by some of the witnesses. When we talk to our teams at our companies, who are some of the largest internet companies on the planet, who have very robust systems in place that are working to handle these requests, when we say what is the biggest problem of efficiency in this system, it is the quality of data requests that we receive from law enforcement, unfortunately. And we work regularly with law enforcement to improve this process. We all share the same goals. Unfortunately, the way we see this bill and some of its requirements, specifically where it begins to mandate how our internal processes work, creates concern, and actually we believe would make our processes less efficient, which we also would argue is a problem for public safety. Technology companies, internet companies receive tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of requests annually from government agencies. Now, I know in talking to some of the committee's offices that this provision doesn't seem extremely burdensome, but when you consider a relatively low amount of requests from U.S. agencies of 20,000 per year, that's 55 on average per day. That's over 275 per week. And those requests each require prioritization, legal analysis, and what is common, not rare, but common, we have to go back and forth with the requester to improve the quality of the request to make it legal. So either narrowing the request because they're overly broad, requiring proper legal justification, whether that be a warrant or a court order, et cetera. So for those many reasons, this process can take a long time. B2C, subdivision B2C, which is what we're exclusively focused on at this point in the bill, would require us to allow each requester, and again, this can be on average on the low end of hundreds per week, different specific requests, to be able to contact our teams directly on their own initiative to ask for a status update and to provide more information. We have two concerns, and then I will wrap up. I know the committee's time is precious at this point. One, public safety. If our teams, which are limited in number and are dealing with many of these requests every week, are spending their time fielding phone calls from requesters rather than doing the important work of prioritizing emergency requests where lives can be at stake, that is a concern that everybody should have on public safety. Number two, we are concerned that, as CalECPA was brought up earlier, that one of CalECPA's greatest attributes was the crystal clarity it provided in the process for what is required in order to get electronic communication information. it's a warrant, it's a subpoena, it's a court order, or it's in an emergency request, we have to do that analysis. It was crystal clear, and we fear that by allowing an automatic direct line into our teams, that it will incentivize less quality requests being put into our systems and facilitate more over-the-phone conversation, which doesn't help efficiency of the process. So for those reasons, we are opposed unless amended. B2C would be removed from the bill. So thanks for your time.
Madam Chair and Senators, Alex Alanis with the California Bankers Association. We believe the bill is not necessary. For banks, we have a process that works and works very successfully. Law enforcement can come into the branch, and we're talking the ubiquity of bank branches up and down California, but they can come into the branch, speak to the branch manager, provide to the branch manager the subpoena and search warrant of the information that they are requesting. And then the branch manager then, of course, speaks to their attorney, see what they can actually provide law enforcement, and then go through the process in providing the information that's being requested. I think that for financial institutions, though, we are very unique because we have to balance the customer's privacy, which is a right under the Right to Financial Privacy Act, against what is being requested by law enforcement, which also requires certain types of paperwork that needs to be provided to the bank in order to comply. For example, on identity theft, you have to come in and provide a search warrant. In addition to that, you'd have to have authorization from the victim and also a police report claiming that they are a victim of identity theft. You have to provide the information that's being requested from the bank, the time frame in which you are requesting, and then the time period in which you are doing the investigation, and then they will provide you the information that's required. If there is a dispute, though, about the speed of information that's being provided, it's probably because the bank is, one, not received the proper information for the customer information that's being requested, or there are other factors that need to be weighed. The customer's privacy, also if there are wider investigations, if there's an identity theft ring that's going on and federal law enforcement is involved, the bank may not be able to provide certain information to local law enforcement. So we would say that for at least our industry, there is a process that works. There is a place in which you could go speak to people, and also requires at least law enforcement to come in, speak to the branch manager, and allow the bank the opportunity to see who they're speaking to face, and review the information and the request that's being, that needs to be disclosed, and then allow us the opportunity to weigh what can actually be provided to law enforcement and what we cannot provide. So with that, we would still remain opposed to the measure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Others in opposition?
Madam Chair, members, Jeremy Merz on behalf of the California Chamber of Commerce, associate ourselves with Mr. Callahan's comments, and we are opposed to the bill.
Kelly Hitt on behalf of the Computing Technology Industry Association. We also echo the comments of the Internet Association, are in opposition to the bill. Thank you.
Madam Chair and members, Kevin Baker for the American Civil Liberties Union of California. There's obviously in the back and forth here a debate about what kind of requests are being made and how the companies are responding to them. Our concern is actually with respect to the Public Records Act provision here that excludes certain information from the public records. We believe transparency is an important value here, and we'd like to work with the author to make sure that we're not concealing information that's relevant to this discussion.
Okay. Others in opposition? Seeing and hearing none, are there questions or comments from members of the committee? Senator Anderson.
Assemblywoman, in the bill, this includes all inquiries, correct?
I'm sorry, it includes all.
Includes all inquiries. For example,
It's either an emergency inquiry or it's one that has required a subpoena.
okay, so those are court orders. The subpoenas are court orders, or the search warrants are court orders.
Correct.
So are there, if law enforcement is going to execute on those and the company chooses to ignore it, have they not violated some crime? I mean, is there no legal recourse against them? I mean, I would think that there would be a lot of things that they could be charged with.
I think the DA would be in the best situation to answer that.
That is correct. In the case of a search warrant, there is a requirement of 5 business days for response. And we are speaking here exclusively of search warrants and emergency orders. In the case of search warrants, those we can call them requests, but as I think you're noting, they're not. They're not a request anymore than an IRS garnishment order is a request. They're an obligation. And unfortunately, one of the one way that I know that I can finally get a response is when I send a very sharp letter saying that we're going to proceed with a contempt complaint. That's not a solution to the problem. There was a lot of there's mention of a lot of different kinds of requests and the poor quality of requests. I can speak to the requests that I make and come through our team. They are we've never had any complaints. We've never been taken to court claiming overbreadth or so forth. It's clear that they just simply languish until you make enough noise that they get attended to.
Well, the concern I have is even if you change this and you impose that they must create this office and this point of contact, if the company still refuses to help you in a timely fashion, your recourse is the same recourse that you have today. And so if you've not used the tools in the tool shed that you have today, or not had if it only requires a sharp letter and not to actually proceed, then why not front load the sharp letter to start with? Why are we changing the law and imposing upon a private company how they do business when we haven't fully used the law that's already on the books?
I want to just add one thing, because there is no contact list for all these companies. Do not provide these contacts lists to law enforcement. Here is somebody that you can call, and they will always answer the phone and be able to deal with your request. So that is the main thing that the bill is doing. The Attorney General will now have a contact list that everybody has to provide information to. So instead of a dartboard where you're trying to figure out how do we get into this service provider, how do we get into this phone company, we have either an organization, or we have an individual, or we have an email address that law enforcement can contact. Because when LADA is a big operation, but you look at some of the smaller operations, they don't know who to contact. There is no contact list. So it's like a dartboard. They just contact everybody. So the first part of the bill is that the Attorney General would maintain a current list of contacts at all these different holders of information. So that's the first part. And then the second part is when a subpoena is issued, now they are required to give, if it is requested by law enforcement, an update of the status, because what you'll hear from I'll hear it from my county and you hear it from LA. These subpoenas are issued and there's no back and forth contact. These providers are not giving information back to let law enforcement know where they are in the process. So it's the two things. It's creating this list that the Attorney General will maintain, and it is making sure that there is the possibility of a two-way communication between these tech companies and law enforcement, and that is currently not happening. And the reason that we came up with this bill, we had a hearing, cybersecurity hearing in the district, and the Sheriff's Department was saying, we had a request, and it was a pretty urgent request, and it was 5 days later before they finally heard, before they finally got the information. So there is a process right now, but many of these requests go over the statutorily defined deadline of 5 days, and now you would have the Attorney General helping to enforce the law.
On the ones that go over the 5 days, though, did those DAs go back and pursue those companies? I mean, we have laws in place now. We're not using them, and now we're going to come up with another law that that how's that going to change the outcome? I mean, so you have a point person, but if the company still refuses to comply in a timely fashion, you're right back to where you are today. I'm having difficulty with this bill because I think it's a Band-Aid when it doesn't really solve the issue. You have diabetes, but you're putting a Band-Aid on it. So I'd like to see where the DAs have pursued the companies that have violated the 5-day rule. But if they've done it in 5 days, they've complied with the law.
But they are interested in, and again, I'll let the DA answer that. They're interested more in solving the issue, trying to find that missing child or trying to pursue that subpoena. They are not interested necessarily in going after the company after the fact.
There are two sorts of situations that we're talking about. One is the situation where there's a search warrant. That's where the 1524 5-day deadline is imposed. The other set of situations are the emergency situations. Those are the critical missings, the kidnappings, those cases. And under 1546, that is not a situation where law enforcement is compelling action. It's a situation where providers have the ability to provide that information voluntarily. And so those are two separate scenarios. Part of the frustration happens in the emergency situations with the emergency requests.
The issue I have, though, is whether you change this or not, it may not lead to changing the company's behavior. If they're moving slowly and they're getting hundreds of thousands of these requests, as they've stated, and they can continue to move slowly, this bill won't answer that or change that problem. It just gives you a point of contact to call and complain, but it doesn't give you the outcome that you want. I agree with your outcome. I agree that if some child is kidnapped, we need to move on it as quickly as possible. But I'm not sure that this bill solves that problem. It just puts another requirement on without addressing the true problem, and that is the compliance to the request.
Well, and it's adding the requirement for two-way communication. So earlier on in the process, that okay, here's where here's an email address that you send your request to, and then you come back and say, this request is going to take X number of days to answer. So that two-way communication is currently not mandated. And having a specific contact certainly, I think, addresses the big part of the problem.
Okay, if I could just say here, it has been my understanding that establishing a formal mechanism with a person to be contacted is not the problem here. That the problem lies more in the necessity of that person to be available 24 hours a day.
A lot of the companies are I mean, they're already providing that. It's the contact, but the issue with the opposition is they do not want to be forced to have two-way communication. They think that would take too much time. And again, they're saying that it's a resource issue for these tech companies. I would say it's a waste of public dollars when law enforcement can't get the proper contact to begin with, and they can't have a back and forth dialogue about additional information that they might have, garnered, and an idea of how long it would take to get their requests fulfilled.
Can I respond? Two quick points of clarification. One, the bill is a bit broader than just our companies. It's any company who provides electronic communication with their customers, so it's not just tech companies. And then number two, the bill is not as narrow as just emergency requests, or it applies to all requests. And so again, when requests come in many different flavors, they're not always provided with a valid warrant, and we have not been given any evidence that our companies are not responding in that.
Let me try. So would this bill cover situations in which there is no subpoena or a valid
It has to
valid
have
warrant?
a warrant or an emergency request where the warrant is going to be issued after.
So that should take care of it.
I don't read the bill that way. This is generically about data requests. Government agencies can put in civil requests. They can put in court orders, subpoenas, warrants, a whole bunch of emergency requests. Sometimes they don't come with the proper legal authority, which is one of the reasons we communicate back and forth to try to improve and narrow down the requests. And that's where we get a high volume of requestors, and the direct line of communication becomes an efficiency problem.
Yeah, and again, this is, we have the intent that it's a warrant, and if the warrant is not properly executed, that's why you need contact information to be able to have a back and forth and streamline this process. So
warrants and subpoenas, or warrants or subpoenas?
No, it's warrants or emergency requests.
Well, it says here, under according to the author, subpoenas, orders, whatever those might be, warrants, and emergency requests. Are you including all of those things?
The warrants and the emergency requests and the subpoenas, yeah.
Okay, so orders would not be included, whatever that might mean?
Orders are, okay. Yes. And those are all already, I mean, there's already a legal mandate to answer those. So this is, again, about having two-way communication.
Senator Glazer, thank you.
Chair, thank you. I want to commend the author for bringing this issue forward. I know simply as a consumer the frustrations that all of us have when we can't reach somebody that's live, and that's a point of frustration, certainly even more so if you're involved in a law enforcement matter. But I am struggling with this bill. I don't have any problems with the issue of specific contact. And I also don't have a problem with providing status updates. I think that's reasonable too. I think that, what the Internet Association has suggested in C, has two elements to it. One is the status and one is this direct point of contact. And it's frustrating for me because it seems like this has got to be a place where we can find some common ground where you achieve the goals, the admirable goals that you've set out, and yet we try to find some level of accommodation. And that's what I'm struggling with as well. I don't know if you feel, Assemblywoman, whether the issues in C it can be divided, that a status update is something that seems reasonable to me, but the ability of law enforcement to have the potential, because there's so many, I mean, unless there's a dispute about how many requests that there have been, annually are submitted, that certainly in the information that in the analysis it talks about in some cases hundreds of thousands in the course of a year. And I don't know whether the factual basis of that is or not, but it just seems that we're trying to find some balance here that's manageable, because I think your goals are very, very good. And I'm just wondering if there's the potential to divide C in terms of what's in or what's not, or whether that would pull off the opposition or not that's expressed today.
The last set of amendments we took did pull off some of the listed opposition. So the cable company, who arguably has more requests than anybody else, is neutral on this, and the Insurance Federation is neutral on this also. So we have worked extensively with the different parties, and we think that these requests, again, by law, they are supposed to answer them, and then allowing, if law enforcement would like to or needs to have an update as to when they're going to get the information that they need, that it seems reasonable to be able to ask that question and get a response. Again, this is in response to our local law enforcement being extremely frustrated by certain companies because they are not in a timely manner, getting information that they need. So then they continue to call the company, all their different contacts. It becomes extremely burdensome from the law enforcement side.
I didn't have the benefit of participating in your hearing that you've engaged in, and I'm sure that's been a great wealth of insight and information that's directed your efforts here. I don't know if it's helpful to identify the bad. I mean, it would be sad to have a couple bad apples now affect the entire industry in terms of measures like this, and I don't see it in the record, at least, the examples that might be insightful and helpful, and I appreciate why that may.
There are a lot of examples, but we didn't think it was necessarily of benefit to drag them out.
I see.
Maybe, did you want to have something? Do you want to?
I need to work with these people every day.
Yeah.
And by which I mean, we're mindful of the fact that there has been an explosion of requests and demands and so forth. In addition, 1546 places new requirements on the warrants, and that placed a burden on law enforcement. It also places a burden on providers. Not necessarily in terms of the review of the warrant. I'm not sure I understand that entirely, but it does place demands in terms of generating the discovery, generating the response. In the past, law enforcement might make a request that was send any and all information pertaining to this account. And that's often logistically a much simpler thing to reply to than a request that is specific and adheres to the minimization requirements in 1546 and specifies what services are to be provided and so forth. That's also the reason that an open channel of communication is necessary, because every provider has its own idiosyncratic language and ways of referring to different services, different records they keep.
But isn't there a way to, with technology, I mean, I can go up to the Secretary of State's website now and see who has unprocessed ballots. There's a status report every day with every 58 counties. So electronically, it's there for me to understand. I mean, isn't there ways to provide most of what you want without necessarily contacting someone individually if you required them to post under whatever confidentiality or status or how you identify the case in some way that no one could know, that allows the service providers to give a robust understanding of where things stand, even if it doesn't mean you get to have that same person on the phone every day. Look, I want you to be able to do your job. I want you to be successful in legally acquiring information, right?
And the bill is not about being able to contact the same specific person. That was changed, and that was, the opposition had an issue with contacting the same specific person. So we worked with the opposition, and we removed that requirement that it's either an email address or a department or a phone number, or it is much more broadly defined than a specific person. So we tried to address all the concerns of the opposition, and like I said, 2 of the big organizations came off, and that was one of their concerns. That's not the case. That's not the case anymore. It's not about a specific person. It's about a department that might be handling these requests, and that law enforcement can go to the Attorney General's website and see, okay, at Apple, this is the person that's handling this is the group, or this is the email address, or this is the phone number.
Right, that's the contact issue. I don't have any problems with that, right? A contact name, a contact. It's really about the status update, which I also don't have a problem with, but it's the second part of C, and a direct means of communicating with the individual or group of individuals responsible for processing.
So it could be email. It could just be, here's the email address, send the email, and at least let law enforcement know how long it's going to, how long is this going to take? And having, because it really is for.
That's an email. Does that address any of their issues if it said email instead of contact?
So most of our the proper way to put in a request for our internet companies is typically an email or a web portal. It's a really convenient way for law enforcement to put in the request. Arguably, we could also provide another email for them to have direct contact with our teams, but I think we've been reading it. I think the intent of it more, has been a phone call. But
that's what you, when you spoke with me, that's what you raised. But does email, if it was specific to email, given that's how you typically communicate, and given that would allow greater control of the information that you provide, would that satisfy you?
I don't know that it's necessary. I don't know that it improves the concern that's been raised, which is now we're emailing a group of individuals, which this isn't a huge team of 100, 200 people. This is a closed universe of counsels who are trying to analyze the myriad of requests. I don't know that an email would really satisfy the requester versus like a direct line of contact via phone.
Well, would it satisfy you?
Because each request originally goes in with the requester's phone number, email contact information, verification of who they are, we're going to pick up as soon as we deem in the universe of requests, looking at emergencies, warrants, subpoenas, et cetera, as soon as we deem it's the appropriate time to reach out to them and facilitate that two-way conversation, we do it. It's the idea that an individual requester can begin peppering us with requests to focus on theirs first, mucks up the process, and we think it's unnecessary at best. I don't know the specific answer to your question about email.
Okay,
but we had already met with the opposition, and there is already, it's whatever way the provider, whether it's a portal, whether it's an email, whether it's the phone number of a group, whether it's an individual, it's up to that company to determine what the request is. But again, to say it's muddle, if you have a request and all you're doing is sending an email response, for instance, that it's going to take us 3 days to get this information, that's pretty reasonable. And law enforcement not having that information is an incredible waste of taxpayer resources.
Okay, we're going to have to adjourn, and I don't know if recess, excuse me, and I don't know if we're ready for a vote right now. One of the problems I have, frankly, is most of these companies are quite well off and making a good profit. What if they choose to only have a couple of people and it takes a very long time to get the answer for law enforcement? That isn't in the public interest at all. So why wouldn't we want, as a state, to set some basic rules that would require this technology not to be able to shield people that want to hurt the public?
Quickly, our member companies are some of the largest companies, as you referenced, and they do have significant teams, and there is no evidence, nor have they said they're having problems meeting the demands. So your point's well taken. The requests should be answered. We feel we are absolutely meeting those requests. We've not been shown evidence otherwise. Those companies who are properly complying with requests, working with law enforcement, are the ones who are opposing the suggested amendment to manage our internal processes. So that's really the conflict.
So you basically think that all the law enforcement groups that testified are just wrong?
I don't think they're referring to our member companies. Honestly, if you look at, if you're in an emergency or you're looking for information on an investigation, you may go to, you can think of off the top of your head 10 companies you may go to first because they deal with a lot of customers, they have a lot of data, et cetera. That's why we've had to implement such robust data request processing teams and units and programs. Those very same teams have said a requirement like providing direct contact information to our teams is a non-starter, and I apologize if that's our position. We've worked closely with the Assemblywoman and her staff all year long. We've not been able to find compromise on that one piece.
And Madam Chair, and I don't think all industries are the same. I mean, I think our process works actually better. You get an actual person, a face-to-face meeting when you come into the branch and you speak to the branch manager. So this process is actually better. What's being proposed in the bill actually supplants what actually is a very effective process. Also, depending upon what the crime is, you have different departments on what's handling it. A fraud department relating to mortgages or credit cards or consumer lending or whatever the line of business is, will be handling that particular crime. And so you may have a list of 10 contact folks that would have to be sent over to the Attorney General's office. And this is every single bank in California, and actually would be any company that has an internet site that communicates with its customers. Think about the overwhelmingly volume of contact information that the Attorney General's office now is going to have to cull through, tens of thousands, probably more than that, and then have to segment it by county. I think it's a pretty daunting task. From our perspective, you just need to come into the bank.
And I would remark that that would already be complying. That's a direct method of contact.
Yeah, I was going to say, is every bank manager a lawyer and able to decide how to handle whatever is
The
asked?
bank manager more likely is not an attorney, but they have compliance officers that are required to go through all the types of laws that are required in order to comply with state and federal law. So there is an attorney they can actually eventually talk to make sure they are not violating the Financial Right to Privacy Act.
Okay. Senator Stone.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Yeah, it seems that this bill is not well cooked. It seems to be very overly broad. I think our banking friends have no problem complying. Our larger internet companies get a significant number of requests, and you brought up the example of kidnapping. Now you got to be prioritizing those things at the demise of other ones that aren't going to be timely met. You know, the definition of service provider. Am I a service provider? I have a pharmacy. I electronically communicate with my customers. I electronically communicate with regulatory agencies. Is every pharmacy in the state of California going to be required to file an annual report with the Attorney General? It just seems that this needs more work. It needs to be narrowed. I think I respect the author and what you're trying to accomplish by all means, but I just see this as too broad and overly burdensome. And we didn't get a chance for the chamber. Is the chamber representative still here? I'd like the chamber representative just to give a couple of quick comments. I'm just one service provider that I think has a lot of potential impact on my industry, and I'm sure there are other ones that necessitated the chamber to oppose the bill, and maybe they can make some constructive comments on it as well.
So initially in the bill, there was a definition that companies didn't know whether it applied to them or not. It was trying to create a limitation. We thought it was simpler. We had asked for, since it is a playoff CalECPA, to use the CalECPA definition. I think that's a legitimate concern. To the extent that it needs more limiting, I don't think we would have an issue with it, though we did support a more clear definition of who was in this bill. And because, again, it does play off CalECPA, that's the definition we used. So, but to the extent it needs limiting there, I think that that's a conversation we can have.
Great. Thank you very much, and hope that the author will continue to work with the opposition to make it more narrow.
Yeah, under the definition of pharmacy, I mean, do you get warrants? Do you get emergency requests from police? And that would really be, and if you get that, then there would have to be some communication on when you're going to respond to that warrant.
Right. And my concern is not about farms, but even startup companies that just don't have the staff dedicated to this. It could be an undue burden upon them.
Okay, we've been going since 9 o'clock, and we were supposed to recess at noon. There are a couple of things we could do here. We can hold the bill in committee, some members want. We could pass the bill on to appropriations so that people would get down to business and clarify some of the things in this bill. This is a very short bill for doing a bunch of very complicated stuff, I think, because I don't have a clear idea of who would actually do what in what circumstances after reading it and reading the analysis. Or we could hold it over for a week and see if there are clarifications that would be helpful and remove some, just some of the concerns. It's very hard when you're dealing with 35 bills in a scattershot way to take an area like this, which might even be more appropriate in the Judiciary Committee or some other committee and try to craft law. So my suggestion, Assemblywoman, would be that we put it over, look at it again. You'll have a week to work on it.
Madam Chair, if I may just say, I don't think there's anybody on this dais that doesn't agree with the
Yeah.
purpose.
Right,
So,
exactly.
I don't think anybody's hostile to it. I think it's just about crafting it.
Yeah,
Right,
that's
so-
right.
So we will hold it over for a week and make sure that we clarify any confusion and work with the opposition.
Or under what precise circumstances, what needs to happen, and how to get it done in the most effective way. Because I heard agreements about things like internet portals or whatever. My concern, because I do agree with where you're trying to go, is that there be enough people who know how to handle it on the tech side so that law enforcement can get what they need in a timely manner. I just think there's probably some more definitions that need to be worked on. So we're going to hold this over till next week. We'll take it up again. And we will recess now and reconvene at 1:30 in room 113. So the committee is in recess.